Hello and welcome to the Raise Recovery Podcast. We are very grateful to have you here today. Today we have with us Tony D. And I just want to say how we met because it's interesting. We're both in recovery. This is the Raise Recovery Podcast. So obviously we're both in recovery. So I had a part-time job and they closed the business, and another business affiliated with that one asked me if I would like to kind of transfer there. So I did, and I was working there for a while. And the lady who actually offered me the job ended up leaving the new place. So she asked me if I could fill in her Wednesday days and nights for her. So I said, sure. During that process, a client of mine, I own a business, and a client of mine referred me to an accountant. We had some tax questions. So he referred me to his accountant. And I eventually got an appointment with this guy. We got to talking, and I told him a little bit about myself, how I'm in recovery, lead a recovery group. And he told me about his son being in recovery and this place he's at, this house. And he introduced the website of Tony's to me. And so it just so happened that the meeting that Tony leads, which we'll get into, was 10 minutes away from my work on Wednesday nights at 7. Doors open at 6:30. I get done at 6, 10-minute drive. That gives me time to get there early. And so it's just interesting to see how God moves things in our lives, because Tony and I both lead Christian-based recovery groups. So that's a little bit about Tony and how we met. And so without anything further, I'd like to hand it off to you, Tony, and tell us a little bit about your story and where it brought you and how it led into what you're doing today.
How far back would you like me to go?
I guess you could start where kind of the beginning, where things started for you and when you first, maybe the catalyst for you starting to use or drink, that kind of thing.
Sure. I'm one of these. I believe I'm a real alcoholic, as outlined in our book. I believe that
The big book.
in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I believe that I was born with addiction. I don't know the first time that I experienced something that I can definitely say was addiction related, but I have some very, very clear memories of my childhood in recovery and some behaviors that were very clear to me. For instance, I grew up in the city in Pittsburgh, in a nice neighborhood, a very nice neighborhood, just a few blocks from bad neighborhoods is kind of where the city is. We had to live in the city. My dad was a city employee. He was a city fireman, which was part of my identity growing up, but I'll get into that later perhaps. But what I recall was my mother giving my brother and I money to go up to the corner drugstore and buy a candy bar. And I bought 2 or 3 candy bars, and I ate the excess candy bars in between the houses on the way back to the house. And I came home with the 1 candy bar I was supposed to have. And that was that. Now, I guess I need to add that when I was younger, I had a weight problem.
Okay.
And my mother was very health conscious. And so I knew that she wouldn't approve of the extra candy bars. And, so that was the first time. Now, it dawned on me once I was in recovery for a while that exact same behavior is how I drank and used. I used to drink more than the people I was with, and I would sneak drinks while they weren't looking, so they didn't know how much I was drinking. And I would want them to think I was drinking as much as they were, or even friends that were using,
Yeah.
When we were partying and doing drugs, I wanted them to think I was doing as much drugs as they were doing, and I was doing more.
I want to interject. When talking about the candy bars, I've learned in recovery, there's usually like a moment, for many it stems from childhood, but some moment in time where something we did or didn't do, or a reaction we had, or a situation. Like for me, I was the little kid with strict parents that wanted my closet clean, and I had toys everywhere, and I was just a little kid, and I was like so overwhelmed kneeling in front of it, and I knew I was going to get in trouble if I didn't have this done by the time they came back in. And I was like I didn't know at the time, but I was having a panic attack. And so I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to handle the situation. So like I ran away from it. And that kind of like you, I can relate that same behavior. Like that's how I handled other things in life, like overwhelmed, don't deal with it, escape, So that's kind of, and I think I just want to say that for the audience, because maybe take a look at yourself. If you struggle with addiction, where was that catalyst if you haven't already figured that out? Like what was that moment? And because for me, that was life-changing. That's what I needed to just recognize so that the healing could like take place. But please go on.
For me, drinking and using was not part of my young childhood. I drank once or twice in high school, and I think I smoked pot a couple of times in high school, but that was it. I didn't have, I don't think I crossed that line, or I wasn't drinking and using to the point of it, certainly to addiction yet. Now, after I graduated high school, I planned to go to tech school. I was not at all. I didn't feel that regular 4-year college was appropriate for me. I always knew I wanted to work on cars. Ever since I was a young kid. My dad was like I said, he was a city firefighter, but they all moonlighted to firemen back then. The way the schedule works. Mm-hmm. Some of them were construction workers, some of them were plumbers, some of them were this and some of them were that. My dad happened to be a mechanic, and so was a couple of buddies of his. So we worked in a garage in Lawrenceville in downtown Pittsburgh. And so I got my experience there. And that was interesting experience, because a lot of my life is work, and work. For a long time, I thought if you could work hard and play hard, and everything's okay as long as you show up to work and pay your bills.
Right. Like a functioning addict or alcoholic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had myself convinced that for quite some time. So I guess fast forward till after high school, and I began tech school. Now I was mildly heartbroken over a high school sweetheart that moved to the side of the country to go to college. And I just couldn't believe that.
Right. I get it at the time. Yeah.
And I remember going through a period of depression and wanting to drink more. For some reason, the group of people I knew at that time, they were mechanics, and they were a little bit older than me, and the guys would hang out at bars, and they had a good time, and there didn't seem to be any downsides. There were no consequences at that time. Every now and then people would talk about a DUI here and there, but if you kept your nose clean, you'd be okay. I was still underage, but I was hanging out with these guys, and that didn't seem to be a problem. So I had a handful of bars that I knew I could get into, and I'd party. This is all around Pittsburgh, and around down in Oakland area, and some of the suburbs, the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh and
Pennsylvania, just for those.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. My story put me in the Bay Area, California, near the other Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Later on in life. But so I distinctively remember, the reason I wanted to bring this part up is because I distinctly remember trying to increase the amount of alcohol that I could drink. So I remember thinking, 3 or 4 beers, I start to, starts to get too much. I start to forget things, and I wish I could, stay up later or drink more, Thank goodness I didn't find cocaine right then. That would have been a good help.
Did that come later?
Yeah. So for some reason, pot and drinking were in my life right then. So I was able to increase the amount I drank and hang out later and this, that, the other. But what happened for me was I met my first set of consequences. I went through tech school. My parents went through some hard times, and I used that as an excuse to move out of my parents' house and live the way I wanted to live, because I was so mad at the situation at home. And I wanted to be a tragedy. I wanted to be a tragic story.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people could relate to that. I do. Yeah.
So for me, the first consequence I had was I had a good job. I went through a 2-year apprenticeship in tech school with General Motors and a community college here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And I had a good job with a good company. And all of a sudden they were going to randomly drug test.
And what were you doing at that time?
I was just graduated my 2-year program.
Like, I mean, chemical substance wise, what were you?
So I was drinking and smoking pot. Every now and then I was doing cocaine. I hadn't moved on to anything else other than that.
Okay. So then the drug test.
The company introduced drug tests, and I had some pothead friends at work, and we all decided that, well, we were going to quit smoking pot because we didn't want to lose our jobs. So we did. And I don't know why that was possible for me at that time, but it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I quit. And then the first round happened. And they called. I got randomly selected the first round. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And thank goodness I was clean and
great.
So I passed my test. Right. Yeah, it was great. So
I thought that was going to go another direction.
So did I. Well, so then, like any good alcoholic or addict at that point, what's the chances I would randomly get selected twice? So I immediately began smoking pot again, as well as most of my friends, because they thought the same thing. And then sure enough, round 2 came around, and wouldn't you know, I got selected randomly the second time. And I failed that one. And then they don't fire you, I got a long stay. I had to test weekly for 6 weeks, monthly for 6 months, and kept my nose clean, so to speak. I didn't fail any drug tests. And then my brother had a house party. I remember my parents went away.
And how old were you about that time?
I was under 21.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep, no, I was under 21. I think I was 20. But I lived away from my parents' house. I had an apartment in Munhall, Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And my brother threw a house party, and I went to it. And I remember, I think it was there, I smoked pot in the backyard with one of our mutual friends or something. And then I failed the test at the job, and they pulled the plug. I didn't think they would do it.
Yeah.
I thought it was so important that they wouldn't fire me.
It's a good point. Yeah. And, I've also experienced, and many of my friends and other people who have been addicted into drugs, like, do we think we're so slick, like I thought I get away with things. No, like I'm not replaceable, which, I mean, yeah, most people at most jobs, you're replaceable, so yeah, I can relate to that. I think some of you guys can relate to that too. But yeah, go on. You got 5 minutes.
Yeah, for me, I spent a couple of weeks bumming around on the couch, and I found I was very talented automotive technician. In fact, that's still the one thing that's my favorite thing to do today, to date, is work on cars. People used to ask me what would I do in my spare time, if I didn't work on cars for a living. And I said, well, I'd work on cars. I just enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it now. So, and I knew that it was dangerous the way I lived. I drank a lot and I drove often. And I knew that if I got caught, that it would impact my career. And that made me very nervous. Now, it didn't change what I did, but it made me nervous, and it made me very careful about it. So, I lost that job, but I've got another job very quickly, and it paid very well. And there was no consequences, so to speak.
You were still drinking and smoking and stuff.
Yeah, I was. And I had still not been introduced to any recovery programs of any sort. And nor did I think I need any. So
needed any? You didn't think you needed any?
At that point, I didn't. somewhere in there, my friend Dustin, a lifelong friend of mine, he's an auto technician as well, who was an auto technician as well, as was I. And we worked together at Saturn. He used to snowboard out in Lake Tahoe. And that's right on the Nevada and California border. And so when he applied at the Saturn dealer there, this is the late 1990s, and he applied for a position out there, and they were recruiting. They desperately needed technicians, and where they're located, they had a lot of trouble finding any. They couldn't recruit any from the Bay Area in California, and they couldn't grow any. They're landlocked where they were in Nevada. It's 8 hours to Las Vegas, 12 hours to Portland, 12 hours to Salt Lake City. It was just so anyway, they needed people, and here they offered my buddy a job, and he had just bought a house here in Pittsburgh and wasn't interested in the job. And I said, hey, what if I call him? Yeah. And so I did. And I flew out to Reno, Nevada. And oddly enough, one of my closest friends growing up lived in South Lake Tahoe, which was an hour away. They had just moved there about 6 months prior. And they were a bunch of ski bums. They skied here in Western Pennsylvania. At the end of the season one year, they all packed up and moved west and skied the remainder of the season in the West Coast in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which are, I don't know if you've ever been or if you've ever seen or ever heard of Lake Tahoe, but it is absolutely beautiful.
Never been there, but I've seen pictures and stuff. Yeah, it's gorgeous, right?
Amazing. Reno, Nevada is right there, so that was part of the attraction for me. I got there, I interviewed with this company, and it went very well. They offered me the job on the spot, and I've phoned my friend up in Lake Tahoe. I drove up and spent the day with them. And it's funny, while we were up there, and, I just had this sense of freedom. We were, the mountains were, lake level was 6,500 feet above sea level. So you have to get about 9,000 feet to get back down to sea level or lake level, 6,500. So, we were driving around in a Jeep with the top down, but we were drinking wine from the bottle and looking at the beautiful mountains, and we felt free, and I'd made the decision on the spot to move out there. So I did. About 2 weeks later, I checked out my stuff and I moved out there. And that was late summer. I was 21 years old. This was 1997. And I moved out in October, and I got a crazy story about getting out there. So it was October. My dad had a white pickup truck, a Chevy pickup truck, and I was a mechanic, right? So I had my tools. That's all you need in life as a mechanic.
Yeah.
You can do anything you need, right?
Yep.
I had a futon. I had an armoire that I found in the middle of the night on the side of the road with my buddies. An armoire. There was an old Seinfeld episode.
Yeah.
So we thought it was very funny, but it was the piece of furniture I took with me, that, a television, and a futon in my toolbox.
Yeah, no.
So my dad gave me his pickup truck, and I gave him my car. We switched, and I hauled ass out for Reno, Nevada. The very first night I got to the Chicago area, and I got the sense that it was not a good area. I tried 2 different hotels or motels, and they were both of the tellers were behind this thick sheet of proof glass, but I didn't relocate. I stayed where I was. Somehow I remember found a night watchman who I paid $20 to keep an eye on my truck that night, and I found a bowling center, like a bowling alley that had a bar and lounge in it. And I went to dinner there, and I had a road atlas. This is long before, GPS.
Yeah.
So I was mapping out my next day's journey, and a woman started talking to me. Her name was Donna. And I ended up talking to Donna for hours and getting drunk, and we started talking about drugs. And I remember my my thought about drugs at the time were, boy, I'll try anything once, So now you asked me about drugs earlier, but so now this time, and I didn't really talk a lot about it, but I had tried acid and smoked pot, a lot. By now, I would consider myself a pothead. I had tried cocaine a handful of times, but that was about it. So this woman, Donna, she started talking about drugs, and she said that she could get crack. And I said, okay, well, how much can you get? I had no idea how much to buy or how much to get, or all I knew was, that I was ready to do some if she wanted to. And by the way, I was not attracted to her. I was not trying to do anything else with her. We were just like partying, and I remember that night, I spent probably about $150 in crack that night. And she and I we went back to her Connect probably 10 times.
Yeah.
And she got very, very strung out. And to me, it felt a lot like doing cocaine. And I thought I liked it. I couldn't tell, but I remember that she got really weird at the end. She asked me for money for breakfast, and I think I gave her $20. And I remember her saying, "Don't ever do this again. It's going to ruin your life." And
jeez.
And I said, I won't, I promise. And I never saw her again. And she gave me a rain jacket, a raincoat that I had for years, like a Chicago Cubs raincoat. And I woke up in my hotel room. I wanted to get up around 8 a.m. and hit the road. I woke up at about 11 or 12, and I felt like I got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
That was the worst. That was one of the worst I'd ever felt in my life. I smoked my pot and took my pills. Boy, at the time, it was very, very popular. They called them mini thins, and they were pure ephedrine, which they took off the market.
That's crazy.
Pretty early on, because that's the raw materials for amphetamines, which at this time, by the way, were not at all popular in the East Coast.
Right.
This is 1997. So now, all right. So that was my crazy story about Chicago. I pulled myself together and got back on the road, and that's all that happened. Nothing worse came of that situation, but that happened, and it was a story to tell. So I hauled on to another day's drive in the middle of the mountains, and I stopped for the night again, and that was my last stop because, like I said, I was eating those tiny pills, mini thins, and they were a lot like speed.
Yeah, it's like speed. Yeah.
So I drove the last night. I remember I drove probably for 36 hours straight.
Jeez.
And I rolled up probably 10 or 12 joints, and I had them lined up in the ashtray and just drove along listening to music and eating mini thin pills and smoking joints, cruising through the desert. And it's just, I pulled up into town in Nevada, in Reno, and it was October 31st, Halloween, which is also, oddly enough, that's a state holiday in Nevada. It was called Nevada Day.
Wow. Okay. So I knew that.
Did I?
Yeah, right.
So I couldn't move into my new apartment yet that I had rented because everybody was off. So I did have a cell phone, but they were very primitive at the time, and not everybody had them. But I drove to Lake Tahoe and found my friend in Lake Tahoe and spent a couple of days with them. And that was fun and funny. In fact, my close friend up there, I'm going to have dinner with him tonight. My wife and I, actually, we're taking our children to his house tonight. He's very successful. He's back in Pittsburgh too, and we're going to see him tonight. So, this has been a friendship, a 30, 40-year friendship, but
it's great.
We were out there together. Now, so that was figure November 1st. I remember driving around Reno. I had a job. I worked at the Saturn dealership, and I had an apartment. I had a pretty nice little life set up. And just, I didn't know anybody. But I remember thinking there was a lot of police cars around. And most of them said county sheriff deputy or something like that. And in Western Pennsylvania growing up, the county police, they had these brown cars. And like, no one cared about. They never gave anybody any trouble. They never arrested anybody. I didn't think much of them. I didn't think much of them other than noticing that they were there. But my point is, I got DUIs out there very, very quickly. And so that was, you figure, November 1st, I got my first DUI on December 14th, so roughly 6 weeks later. My second DUI I got in January. Now, the first DUI, my friend Neil, that I'm going to see tonight, he and I went to jail together. That was it. You know, he was under it all. He was underage, and I got a DUI. But my second DUI. See now. Well, I used to have this joke. Every time I'd go up to visit my friends in Tahoe, we'd joke about doing a new drug. I had eaten mushrooms now for the first time up there. I had tried a couple of designer drugs, specifically this one called GHB, which I received my second DUI on. So I would do it. I don't know about it, but I believe it's a concentrated amino acid, and boy, it messed me up, and we took it and it was like a liquid form. It did a little cap full and some orange juice. And, I would take it up there, and then I took some home with me to Reno. And I remember I had a Monday off. It was Sunday night, and I thought, well, I'm going to go down to the bar by the college. I had a couple of beers, and I drank some of that GHB before I went down. And I remember ordering a beer, and I must have been pretty sloppy. And the bartender asked me to leave. And I remember standing outside, looking at my wallet, thinking, why am I out here? I wanted to be in there for a beer. So I went back in, and this guy, I remember, just threw me through the door and up against the wall, and he roughed me up pretty good. I'm pretty sure, but I don't remember after that. I vaguely remember driving, but I was driving north on Kitsky Lane in Reno, Nevada, on the wrong side of the road, and I did cut off a police officer. Thankfully, I didn't hit anybody. I do remember some flashing lights, and I do remember him being slammed violently against the hood of a car.
Yeah.
Then I remember waking up in a hospital gurney, shackled, face down, and I can see blood everywhere. I felt some weird things, the shackles. I later found out I had a catheter in, but I remember a nurse asking me some questions, and the year and who the president was and things like that. And I answered them some ridiculous answers, and they let me go back to sleep again. And then I woke up again, and just like that, boom, I was very, very clear-headed, which is exactly how GHB is, by the way.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And so I immediately wanted to be away from there, and I wanted to go home. They questioned me on a few things. I knew I had many things in my car, ephedrine, which was not illegal at the time. Sure, it became illegal shortly thereafter. And actually, GHB was not illegal at the time. So if I had enough money and enough sense, I probably could have fought this a different way. Not that I should or would, but it was a second offense. And the report, all that time that I was blacked out, and I remember being slammed against the car, the report from the police officer read that I was very rigid, and I was fighting back and salivating, and it was just a bad report. And the attorney that I hired suggested that since I had a first DUI that was not complete, that this would hit, and it would be another first DUI, and it would just be over in 3 months and just move on. keep your nose clean, don't screw up again, and everything will be fine. And so I said, yeah, let's do that. And I cleaned up my act, and so that's what I did. I started smoking better pot, and I started drinking better beer, and I managed to not get arrested for about 9 months, and then so this is all within the first year. And I got a third DUI after a wedding. A friend of mine that I worked with got married. I actually stopped drinking during the wedding and started drinking water because I knew I had to drive home. And so by now, my dad had come back out to trade me out vehicles. So I had my own car back, which had Pennsylvania license plates on it, out in the middle of Nevada. It stands out, and I'm not, that's not why I believe I got pulled over. I think that drew some attention to me, but I crossed a line, and I remember that police officer stayed with me for quite some time beforehand. And once I crossed that line, he hit the lights, and I got my third DUI. So now that's a felony in Nevada. And so I was looking at it in serious time.
Yeah.
So now, I'm 22 years old and looking at some serious consequences. That's what happened for me, and I ended up going to prison. So my sentence was for 12 to 30 months, and when I went in, there was talk about this DUI program if I went to it. So it's sort of like a rehab.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was some cognitive
behavioral therapy.
Correct. Some things like that. And then if you had a job and a place to live, then you could get out on house arrest. And after 3 months. So I remember talking, I'm going to be gone for 3 months. I'm going to be gone for 3 months. I'm going to be gone for 3 months. Well, once I got in there, it became very clear that I was going to be gone a lot longer than 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And the system, just once you're in there,
it's tough to get out.
There's no way to expedite anything. There's no one's more important than anybody else. There's no way to be heard. It's, anyone who's been locked up or done time can tell you for sure that there's something inside you becomes broken when you are locked up. You're losing. I hear people in society talk about how inmates, get cable TV or get some perks and some things that are good, and yeah, some things seem unfair, but for the most part, those people don't have a fun life. When you lose your freedom, it would take a lot of little special little things like that to replace what you've lost.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a quick break for like 2 seconds, and we will continue with where that kind of took you. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. All right, we're back. So, Tony, tell us about the worst your, using got and what ultimately led you into recovery, whether that was a rehab or, like the last hurrah.
Sure. Now, in my story, there are 3 rapid succession DUIs in Reno. That first time my dad bailed me out of jail. And I remember my conversation with him the first time. I talked to him on the phone after I got home. And, they knew, my parents knew something was up before I left Pittsburgh. They just knew. There's been a few times where they just knew something was up. So I remember my dad telling me, listen, go to AA. There's good people there. talk to them, they're going to help you. And that's the advice he gave me.
Mhm.
So I did. I went to a couple of AA meetings. It was the first time I ever gone, and whatever. I met a couple of people, and I remember the one guy that I met who ended up being a temporary sponsor for me, and I told him I didn't know if I was an alcoholic, and he said, "Well, if you're not sure if you're an alcoholic, why don't you just try not drinking?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it, and I'll do it tomorrow." And that next day came, and I went to work. I don't know what happened, but at the end of the day rolled around, and what I used to do is I used to allot myself $10 a day at that time to drink. And that was worth $3 pints of beer at the bar, or it was a bottle at the liquor store. And so that first night, I remember, I'm not sure, am I going to go to the bar, or am I going to go to the liquor store and go home? I didn't know what to do. So I don't remember which I did, but one way or another, I got drunk that night. And then that next day, I thought, what happened? I was supposed to stay sober. And I thought, well, I forgot, and I'll do it tonight. And then that same thing happened, and around the same part of the day came around, and I was trying to decide if I wanted to go to the liquor store, go to the bar. And that's the day that I knew I had a problem, because I knew I didn't want to not drink. I wanted to drink. And I didn't care. I didn't care that I might have a problem. So fast forward a little bit more, now I'm facing some hard, some real, hard state time in prison. And when I was in there, that was the most scared I've ever been in my life. I couldn't believe I was there. I've lost my freedoms. I can't believe that I was looking around. I couldn't believe that I was there when it happened. I grew up in a good home. I'm not a bad person. What happened? So that was my first time in sobriety. When I was introduced to AA through but you'd think that would be the lowest point in my life, and unfortunately it was far from it. For me, I stayed sober three years that first time. I drank secretly for about 1.5 years, and then I stayed sober another 3 years, and then I went to meetings all the time. I joined AA, and I went to meetings all the time. When I was a very, very, very active member of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Excuse me, I was an active member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, not the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sure. So I was around. I went to meetings. I went to coffee. I went to restaurants afterwards, all over Reno, and I stayed sober, and it worked. And then I moved to the Bay Area, and I went to a meeting or two, and someone said something to me, and I felt like they implied that I was a newcomer. And I thought, screw you. You have no idea who I am. I'm Tony. I got 3 years. Yeah. And I'll show you, and I got drunk.
Jeez. Yeah. I get that mentality and attitude. Yeah. Okay.
So that repeated itself a few times for me. And then I was sober when I met my wife.
Current wife.
My current wife.
You've only been married once, I'm guessing.
No, actually, I've been married once before. I met a girl in Reno, and when I moved to California, to San Jose, she and I were dating, and I got married when I was 24 years old.
To the first wife. Yeah. Okay. And how old were you when you got divorced?
29.
So about a 5-year marriage, roughly.
Okay. And we did not have any children, thank goodness.
Yeah, right. And then so Vega came into the picture, your current wife.
Yeah. So the marriage wasn't good. I got out of it and didn't look back. So I was single and sober and very happy, and I was not looking to meet anybody, and I met Vega, my wife.
Wonderful woman, by the way. She's a beautiful woman. Yeah, I mean, from what I know, you're laughing, but I think she's a great woman.
I got very, very lucky.
I'd say, yeah, you did, man. Yeah, good for you. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, God bless Vega.
We're in the same business. You
worked the same place?
Yeah, okay. That's how we met. We met at work. We didn't work together, but I'm still in the car business, and I'm the manager of fixed operations, that's service and parts. body shop if you have one. And Vega was the director of F&I, which is finance and insurance.
Okay.
So a couple of large Nissan dealers in the Bay Area where we worked. So the gentleman that I worked for got promoted to a position at her dealership, and that's how we met. I used to go visit him, and Vega got a lot of attention in the car business.
I can see,
from men, as you can see why.
Yeah.
So, and I did not give her a lot of attention. I just kind of waved, and I guess that got her attention. So sooner or later, our mutual friend, our old boss, actually set us up. So, So we fell in love very quickly, and
like first date kind of thing, or
pretty
first
much.
couple. Yeah.
We were joking the other day because when we met, we went. It took a month or two before we actually went on a date, but we went to our friend's house for Thanksgiving dessert, and then I asked her on a date that night, and then we went on a date I think a week later, and then we spent almost every day since together. So
that's great, man. That's sounds like a true love.
Well, yeah, and it hasn't been. I nearly lost her, and I lost my family.
Well, yeah, because I was going to ask you. I mean, because we obviously haven't gotten to the worst yet. So you had met Vega, and then like enter drugs scene. What happened there, or alcohol and drugs, or whatever.
So by now we're talking. This is.
And how old are you at this?
2000. This is 2007. I'll say, and I'm about 30 years old.
Okay, at the time.
31. I was 29 or 30 when I was divorced. I remember my divorce was final right before I met Vega, and then we met, and I was clean. I was sober when we were dating, and I don't remember when I started drinking, but something happened, and I started drinking Everclear.
Man, that's rough.
Yeah,
strong,
and
cheap and strong, but rough.
I had this theory where it was so strong that I would need to drink half as much, and I wouldn't need to pay as much.
We tell ourselves, to try to justify how use successfully, man. Yeah.
So I had this bottle in my truck. I had a pickup truck, and I had a jam between the back seats, and I just hit like a speed bump or something in an apartment complex, and it just rolled right out. And that was the first time I got busted there. And she was understanding. I ended up getting one more DUI in like 2010. And I think she was relieved because she knew I had been drinking, and she knew I needed some consequences. And I was running wild, and it wasn't going well. So I got that last DUI, and then everything happened for us at one time. We got caught up in the real estate bubble out west. And she had bought a home in 2005. I had bought a home in 2005. Now it's coming up on 2010, and everything, the markets are all upside down, and the bubble had burst. Real estate wasn't worth anything. We had to refinance our homes or sell them, and we ended up short selling our homes and moving back to Pittsburgh because I ended up losing my job again because I had gotten another DUI, and my behavior was all of a sudden turned really bad at work. And this is all again I'm using, but and now I'm Vega and I, like I said, we fell in love quickly and got engaged, and then Dominic came very quickly.
Your first
our first son Dominic came very quickly. And I don't know if it was the weight of all that
sure, it's a major life change. I mean,
that took me off, but we ended up somehow. I went to my first rehab in there, my first 30-day inpatient rehab, and I got some good quality sobriety.
What happened after you got out?
Out of rehab.
Yeah, that 30 days.
After I got out, so I'd already lost the job, and our son was around 1 year old. And I was doing an IOP.
Intensive outpatient,
right. And now we had sold our one house, and we had the second house that we were just ready to sell. And our plan was going to be to come back to Pittsburgh because we knew we had to move. Our houses were we had to sell them.
Yeah.
I had lost my job.
Right.
We were living on savings, and there was a lot of promise back in Pennsylvania. So also Vega was pregnant with our second. We have 3 beautiful children, by the way, and
I thought you had 4. Okay, 3. Okay,
3.
2 girls and a son and a boy.
Boy, girl, girl.
Boy, girl. Yeah, 2 girls. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So, I did inpatient treatment, and then, stay sober for a while and I drink for a while, and stay sober for a while and drink for a while. But, we moved back to Pittsburgh, when she was about 6 months pregnant with our second.
Okay.
With Avery. And
you had already gotten out of the 30-day rehab. And
correct.
Okay.
So we moved here, and I worked a pretty good program. I went to a lot of meetings. And things went pretty well for quite a while. Now, so now I'm 32 years old. I'm very, very familiar with opiates by now, but I haven't personally been involved with them. And I don't know why, but now all of a sudden I was introduced to opiates. And the first time I wound up with a job on the road as a consultant. And through a friend of a friend, I used up in Wisconsin, I believe was the first time.
What, heroin or?
Heroin.
Like, did you just sniff it, inject it?
The first time I used it, I injected it.
Your very first time, wow.
Yeah,
most people usually kind of progress to that, but that's, wow, okay.
So I found a new passion.
Yeah.
Which
a new love.
Yeah, new love. And I'll tell you, that one didn't take long to take me down.
Yeah. How long? Just for you personally?
I would have to say
a couple weeks, couple months.
From that point, it was about the first time I tried it. I wouldn't say I was hooked right away, but that within 6 months, I remember that same year, I woke up on New Year's Day after sneaking drinking, and I was all yellow. And my wife noticed it.
Jaundice. Liver shutting down.
Yeah, my eyes were yellow, my skin was yellow, and I couldn't deny it.
Yeah.
And so I went to the doctors, and I got tested. And as it turns out, I had acute
hepatitis of the liver?
Well, no, I had hepatitis C.
Well, but also when the liver is sick, they call it hepatitis of the liver, even if you don't have AOC. That's another term. That's what the doctors told me.
Got it.
When mine shut down.
Because you can have alcoholic hepatitis.
Yeah,
that's probably what you have.
Mine was from injecting a lot of MDMA, like Molly.
Oh.
And you're not supposed to inject that stuff. I was injecting like 3.5 grams a day for like a few years. Yeah, well, it sounds like fake almost because you're not supposed to be able to survive doing that for that long, if at all. But so I'm familiar, with the jaundice, liver shutting down thing. Yeah. But anyway,
pancreatitis is what I was trying. Pancreatitis, which was just a side effect of drinking too much alcohol. But that I don't, and the hep was from. Most likely from a dirty needle.
Yeah.
So now,
So where did that opiate thing take you? Heroin. Yeah.
It took me to where, I would signal. So my wife would throw me out a lot when she would catch me drinking or using, and she didn't know about the heroin. But, so I would go to my friend's house and be in the basement, and then I had at one point I got an apartment in Avalon, not far from here, and I stayed there, and I drank myself silly, and I ended up having to go to detox, and then I stayed with my parents. It's the first time and last time I've gone home to my parents since I was 17 or 18 years old, and but that was in a way good. But the next door neighbor, a kid I grew up with named Jake, He was a heroin addict, and I was friendly with him. We were friends, I'd try to help him out, but I ended up using with him, and he was a connect of mine. So I did some crazy stuff with him. I'd make a purchase and he'd deliver out to the suburbs where I live.
So you're married to Vega at this time. Yeah. She's kicked you out because of your using, and so you're staying with your parents. And it just so happens Jake still lives there or whatever. I don't know if he was always there, and he does heroin. And it's like you try to go somewhere to be safe, and right next door, you realize you're not as safe as you want to or need to be, kind of thing. It sounds like. So just interesting how these things work. I don't know.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing parts or something.
No, it's true. It's
did you know he lived there and you thought I can go to my parents and I can maybe get reservations?
I did a good job of making sure my parents thought I was doing just fine and maybe I could help Jake.
Right. Right. But did you have reservations in the back of your mind?
Yeah, I thought maybe,
something could happen there. Yeah. I get you.
Yeah. I knew I wasn't done yet.
I got it. Right.
Something like that. So somewhere in there, like I told you before, I never stopped going to meetings. I went to meetings, a ton of meetings. Now, my wife, had gone to check out a bunch of different churches, and she started to feel what we know to be the Holy Spirit pulling on her heartstrings now. And she was looking at different churches, and I followed her to a few. She went, and I went also, and I remember going and hearing the music in the church, and I would cry, and what happened is for me, what I know now what happened is I started to develop my relationship with Christ.
And of course, that makes sense.
And that was his Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I came to believe that. So here now, the program, I'm a firm believer in the 12 steps and the program, any 12-step
like AA, NA, traditional, what people would consider traditional recovery kind of.
Yes. And I believe it started, and I know that it started with AA.
Mm-hmm.
The purist in me likes AA and those formats, and I like the history behind it. I've studied a lot of it, so I like it. But now, for me, spirituality has been very difficult. I'm just not a spiritual person. I never think I see ghosts. I'm just not a spiritual person. So this theory of a God of my own understanding, the way AA presents it, I think was difficult for me to grow my spirituality. I had a hard time with that. Now, fast forward, I'm sitting in church crying over the music. So, now something's starting to happen. God's starting to work in my heart.
Yeah.
We found someone found for me. I do not remember how, but up in Cranberry at a church, there's a Christian recovery group that meets on Tuesday nights, and a friend of a friend, very strange story. I got a job, and a guy that worked for me, a technician that worked for me, his brother, I met a guy at the meeting there, and I didn't know until after he had agreed to be my sponsor. They were brothers. So it was very interesting, just the way God puts people in your life. Yeah. But in this group, it was, Christian recovery group. So it sort of molded, traditional recovery with some Christian beliefs. So now they had another group that was meant for, like traditionally would be for Al-Anon, AA and Al-Anon. AA would be for the alcoholics, and Al-Anon would be for the wives, the family members. So, Vega was ready to move back to California with our children and hated my guts and did not want to do anything to improve, to help our situation. She just wanted away from me. I told her about this group and that she wouldn't even have to see me, And I knew that she had been going to church, and I knew that God was working on her heart, and I really hoped that she would go. And she did, but she didn't talk to me for a long time. But, God started softening her heart, and we both went there for a couple of years. And then after, it probably took a year and a half, and we started talking again, and then she allowed me back into the home. And thank God, we've been doing very, very well ever since.
It's great. Your relationship is strong, restored.
Yeah, it's been restored.
Praise God.
We've been redeemed. Yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah, praise God indeed. And our children, fortunately, do not remember us. And
That's good.
They don't remember me drunk. Good.
Wow, that's so good, man.
Yeah.
So after all that, so how did that lead you to your own group and the 3/4 house, which I don't think we even really touched on, but yeah.
So I mentioned the group. The group is called Victory Group.
Yeah, in Cranberry.
Yes,
I'm familiar with that one. Some people come to my group go there too on Tuesday nights. Yeah.
Sure, makes sense. Now, we wanted, after attending there for a few years, living in the West Hills and Moon, and being active in our own church, we thought, well, there's got to be some other people around that
have a Christian-based recovery
that need this, that would benefit from Christian-based recovery. That
sure, I have the same thoughts. I get it. Yeah,
there just was nothing that existed in the West Hills. Right. So
okay,
so
your own experience was like, hey, I see there's obviously a need for this. I'm sure other people, maybe I can help them. So
that's exactly what happened.
Cool.
Yeah. So we had gone to that one in the North Hills for quite some time, but we were going to church in Moon. We're at our regular church. And
is that where the group's held? That's your church. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what church is that?
St. Philip's.
St. Philip's in Moon Township. Yep.
On Beaver Grade.
Right off Beaver Grade. Yeah. Okay.
And so we asked the church if we could start a ministry there, and they were very supportive and helped us along the way with anything we needed and supported us. So
that's really awesome.
I want to say that I believe that we are in our 6th or 7th year of existence.
Wow. So that is I've been there several times. Yeah. Like I said earlier. And so it is a Christian base, we pray there. I don't know, you'd have to speak on this more than me, but I know like at my group, and I think you're the same, but maybe you can confirm, it's like, it doesn't matter if you're a believer or not. Like if you just need help with addiction, you just come. Nothing's going to be shoved down your throat. It's like, here, just is what we're about. We do pray, disclaimer, we claim Jesus Christ as our higher power. But yeah, you don't need to, you could be an atheist, whatever you are, just come, and see if it helps you. I mean, it can help. It should help you. It will help you. It can help you. It just depends if we're open and willing. But are you guys the same way there? Like it does, like, or is it just like you have to be part of Christian?
Yeah, we are a Christian-based recovery group, but in our literature, I don't remember the exact line it is, but we accept all faiths are welcome.
Welcome all faith. Yeah, right.
And we welcome anyone specifically to the church if they have nowhere else. But that spirituality piece was so big for me. It just made the world a difference.
Yeah, changes everything.
Yeah.
Whole approach and everything.
Yeah. So now that group.
And when's it meet? Like day and time?
Yeah, we meet every Wednesday.
7. Well,
meetings 7. At 7. We open doors at 6:30 for dinner.
Yep.
So
they always have like a really nice, decent meal there too for people like coming from work. They don't have to worry, and out of their own dime, their own pocket too. So
yeah, it's free dinner. and there's childcare. So we wanted people to be able to come and not worry about their kids or making dinner that night, because that's where we were at. We had 3 little kids. We had no time. There was no time it needed to be very convenient for us to heal, and God made it that way. And by meals and childcare and things like that, so that Vega was able to go there and talk to other people and get help, while I was in the other room talking to people I needed to talk to get help. So yes, every Wednesday night.
And there's 2 meetings, one for the addicted and one for the families of the addicted.
Correct. So we have FFA, Friends and Family of Addiction, and that's like Al-Anon. So that would be any people, the first group would be recovery and early recovery. So anyone who is addicted to alcohol or drugs and wanted to stay clean and sober would stay in our group. And then the other group would be the FFA, Friends and Family.
Which is like your version of Al-Anon in a sense, yeah. And so before we talk to how to contact you and stuff, let's talk a little bit about the 3-Quarter House. Like, where's it at? When did you open it? How does that work? Is it co-ed? Is it just for women, just for men? Just describe a little bit about it.
It's actually, I'm proud to say that the Hope Recovery Group home is the city of Pittsburgh's first one and only Christian-based men's recovery home. There is one other women's Christian-based, faith-based.
But this is the first men's.
First men
and only.
First one and only in Pittsburgh. Yeah. In the city of Pittsburgh. So now we never thought of doing this, having a recovery home. We had this group, that we knew God called us to do. And it's grown. We've gotten, I would think our membership is probably 50 to 70 with, the average weekly. Yeah, altogether with average weekly, maybe 30 people, 25 to 30 people there a week,
Yeah.
And so, it used to just be 4 of us,
Yeah.
It's 2 or 3 of us or 2 of us sometimes. And so it's gotten, it's gotten to be known and people count on it. And so that was rolling along for a long, long time. And now I don't know why it was, but a friend of ours who's a realtor knew of a developer who knew of someone else who was very, very close friends with the director of Light of Life.
Okay.
Mission on the north side of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, which for people maybe don't know that. Yeah, it's a mission right in pretty much the heart of the city of Pittsburgh. They've been around for a very long time. You've probably even heard of Light of Life maybe in your area, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay.
So they came to speak at our church. We ended up, they found out about our ministry and started asking us questions about it. They were asking questions about how we provide our meals and things like that. And we're really primitive. We're not good about
it's like you bring it
fundraising. We're not good about getting people to pay for things. We paid for most of it out of our own pockets just because we felt like that was that was part of our offering. And so that's how this started. So we met with the Light of Life people because they had a lot of food resources. And so we met with them. And once we started talking with them and learned, they had like 150 beds they managed out of their facility over there on in the north side. And then I started reading more and more about the housing problem and how important co-living and group homes and sober living homes were. And I tell you, I've never, Vega would tell you the Bible verse, but drop your plows and follow me.
Felt the call to do this.
Yes, I've never felt the call to do anything the way I felt the call to do this.
It was very strong and prominent and obvious.
Yeah.
It was like undeniable. I understand. Yeah.
When people say they have felt a calling to do something, I understand what they mean, but I didn't understand what they meant before.
Right.
I knew I always wanted to work on cars. I knew what that felt like. That was somewhat of a calling, but this is something different.
Yeah.
And we got to work really quickly, and we bought a house in the Sheridan neighborhood in
So it's like
Pittsburgh.
It's near McKees Rocks, and yeah, so yeah, real close to where we're at here, honestly. But and from our previous talks, I've been to the house. It's really nice. I think there's like 7 rooms. I can't remember, but very nice. It was better than the 3-quarter house I was in, which was an Oxford house in Butler. No hate on that. I'm very grateful. I had a great time and everything, but yeah, it's a nice house. I know you've expressed to me there was quite a few hurdles and issues because neighbors and they thought it would be a bad thing there, and it turns out that typically guys, I don't know, from my experience, like even in my 3-quarter house, we would help the neighbors, and so like, we were like better for the society. Now I realize not all of them are like that, but if you have a good 3-quarter house, man, like consider yourself blessed if it's next to you or on your block. I mean, that can be a blessing, because them guys, when they really want to change their lives, like me and the guys in mine did, and the ones in Tony's, for the most part, I mean, you're always going to have 1 or 2 that still aren't getting it, but it can really change. And these kind of guys, like, we know the streets, and we watch out for things. We see something happening, someone breaking into a car, like, we'll go out and stop them and call the police. And it's like becoming recovery's possible, becoming a good functioning member of society that contributes, but yeah. And so it's an awesome mission that you're doing. So, but I want to go ahead and, if you want to tell a little bit more about it, and also like, how do you get in there if you're in the Pittsburgh area? What's the requirements?
It's a great house. It's we've been through lots of sober houses because we've met lots of people in the business, and we wanted to see how they were operated and what it was like. We have an app that everybody has on their phone.
That's cool.
And they have to, we were able to track them on their app. They check
accountability.
They check into the meetings on their app. They have to go to 5 meetings a week, and they have to do random drug tests every week. It's a big old city house. It's got like 5 or 6 bedrooms or something. And, there's a house manager that lives there, and, he's been in recovery he's been sober for a few years. They have to have a minimum of 12 months to be a house manager.
How long clean do they have to come, and like what's the like application process for someone coming?
If someone wanted to live in the house, we asked that they were minimum 30 days clean or sober, but we will accept someone with less sobriety if they are clean already and sober already. And the only thing we can't do is allow someone to detox there.
Sure.
Because it's a level 2. It's a level 2, so it's
illegal.
A house.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. There's nobody there trained medically to help someone detox. So we can't. When you're detoxing, especially from alcohol,
it can be very dangerous.
Very, very dangerous. So anyone that wanted to apply would go to our website, and that's www.hoperecoverygroup.com, and there's a section on there for Hope Recovery Group, and there's an application on there, and that goes directly to my wife. Vega does all the intakes with all of the residents, and it's been a great experience so far. We're still in our first year.
When did the house open?
It opened sometime in
March, June 2023.
Yeah, June in 23.
And it's basically like March.
Right.
Well, it's about to be March 2024. It's February 24th. So, it's leap year. Hey,
that's right.
This is a special show. We just realized that. It's a leap year show. That's cool.
We just went to look at another house this morning. Hopefully Hopefully we put an offer in on it and make Hope Recovery Group home number 2. But it's been interesting. The need really is there. And the guys are just, they're yearning for love. They're yearning for direction. They're yearning for recovery. We've had some unfortunate cases where people didn't work out, or they decided to drink and use and they disappear. We had one OD in the house. Sometimes guys aren't ready, but
it happens. Yeah.
Right now, currently, the very first person to move in there is still there. And he's working a really great program.
It's great. I've met a lot of the guys. I mean, I think I've met all of the guys there at one point at least, and they, I can say that they, for the most part, seem like pretty committed to their recovery. I have conversations with them. Some of them guys are very intelligent, got a good head on their shoulders, very spiritual. They know the Bible, they know God. Some of them, you have different kinds, but there's some I see there with some real serious struggles but they're doing it, and they're working on themselves. It's such a beautiful thing to see, despite kind of struggles that might be outside of their control. They are still pressing forward. So it's cool. I mean, and when you're in an environment of men like that, or men with men, women with women, but when you're in an environment of men like that, I didn't realize it at the time, but what a blessing that was to have all that support while I was still the fog was still lifting, getting more clean time under my belt. Having that, you become a brotherhood, and those relationships will last a lifetime, even if you don't talk a lot afterwards. So you can pick up right where you left off, and it's each other on an intimate level, and you've shared things, and things that before on the streets you're just not comfortable with. There's a heart change that happens through Christ. Yeah. So to find out anything about the Wednesday night meeting, more about your guys' mission and the house, we'll put this in the show notes too, but they go to where?
www.hoperecoverygroup.com.
Okay, cool. And you guys have some social media too, right? Instagram?
Yeah.
Can you send people there to look at things?
Yeah.
What's the Instagram page called?
I think that's hoperecoverygroup.com.
It's just Hope Recovery Group, or just Hope Recovery Group. Okay, cool. Was there anything else you wanted to say, Tony?
No, it's a pleasure to be in this, being in the recovery business, so to speak. It's kept me connected
accountable
in a manner that I didn't think I would be involved in. So it's very healthy in that manner for my recovery. And I really enjoy having the house, and I look forward to having more. Like I said, we've been into lots of them, and a lot of them are less than desirable. They're dark and dingy.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal was to have a bright, healthy place where, people had positive energy and they got positive affirmation from their fellows, from us and from their fellows. And so that's what we're trying to do: spread the love, spread the word, and help the next.
Sorry, sad sack that God did what we did. Yeah, amen, brother. Amen, man. Really appreciate it. So there's no other questions. I'm sorry, comments from you. I'm asking the questions, but yeah. So do you guys have any openings there now, as of the recording date, which we gave away?
Yeah,
2/24/24.
Right now, I believe there's one bed open. I think there's someone interviewing for it right now.
So basically, just if you're looking for a place, especially if you prefer a Christian type environment, go to hoperecoverygroup.com and submit an application. And I mean, never know how you could see this. You could be seeing this years in the future. So, and by that time,
even if we're full, we're going to talk to you, and we might have a bed available at a different house. Or
right,
we're in a network of a bunch of different houses. So even if something isn't available with us, we can get you hooked up with a friend of ours in a healthy place, in a healthy environment. If I had gone to a recovery house like this, and not my friend's basement, and not my parents' house, I think it would it would have helped my recovery earlier. It would have been a healthier thing for my recovery earlier on.
Yeah, I get it. Well, hey, Tony, I appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, brother. I hope many more good things come and, see where our relationship goes too, man. So
yeah,
we're both through the same thing. It is. It's really cool. Me too. Because it's hard to find other people out there that are leading and building Christian-based recovery groups and things like of that nature to help people with that need, because there is a need. There is a dramatic need. I hear it all the time. People in my group, like, I just want a recovery-based group that's Christ-centered, like centered around Christ. And there's a strong yearning and longing and need for that. Mm-hmm. So, and families as well. So I really respect that, because we want to branch out into families, our group as well, in some way. So there's a lot going on right now, but we will get there. So, all right, brother, appreciate you coming on and spending most of your Saturday afternoon here and being a busy guy. So, all right, we'll put the links in the description down below, and feel free to leave a comment and get a hold of me. And if you need help, reach out. There's hope. There's always hope, and we do recover. All right, till next time, take care. Take care.